Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. We take a little step in this dome investigation or development. We take a step perhaps forward. If not forward, it's sideways. I'm going to call it forward. I have looked many times at different strut ends to try and get my head round the benefits or not of one over another. Often I see iterations of a particular design and I think, well, yeah, that works, that's elegant. But I sometimes wonder just how difficult and what benefit they would be, because some of them just look like they've been banged together and it detracts. And then I saw something that I thought, that combines a couple of the aspects of one and counters the shortcomings, I would say. And that's where you have plates wrapped around the end of the strut, screwed or bolted through and attached to the hub. But quite often on the deeper struts, they are at an angle not parallel to the axis of the strut itself, and it just looks not quite right. It just doesn't, it's not pleasing at all. And I thought, well, you'd have to cut each plate to the angle. I should show you pictures, but look, this is just something new. I just wanted to throw it in the mix for consideration. And this is where, if we took this part of the attachment away, we've got in this case, a 50 by 50 strut, and we've reduced it down the thickness of the inner wall of the steel hub that I just made disappear. I'll better get rid of Chris. Actually, I might delete poor old Chris. So we've got a box section that we can slip over the end, and that distributes the load over a massive area. Not only can we fix it through the sides and the base, but it encapsulates the full end of the strut. Now, that's both a good and a bad thing, because if moisture gets in there, how's that going to work? But really, we'll leave that one aside for just now. But if we have the box section, we have a rod drilled through. The hub is identical in effect to what we've been using in the past. So everything that we've done before now still applies to this hub, which is pretty darn good. But it's just a rod with 4 nuts, 2 there and 2 here, which makes the strut tunable or adjustable to some degree. More than likely you would weld the nut on the underneath side and reinforce it with this nut here if that was deemed necessary. Then I looked at that and I thought, okay, so that's that one. And I made the necessary cut on the end of the steel, which means very similar to what we've already done in other tutorials or other look at ideas. We can have our metal cutting chop saw cut at a particular angle, so we just have to set up our digital protractor, cut them at the prescribed angle for the hub strut position, and again bolt it through, because now that means that everything's still bolting up square, which addresses one of the issues, and we get away from the requirement to have, as my preferred option, a threaded in tendon or threaded rod into the timber itself. Still a really good way of doing it, but this gets rid of the need for, or the issue of the angle at which that needs to be installed in at. So I thought, right, that's a 50 by 50 with a 50mm ring. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then I thought, right, this is looking pretty good. This is a 100 by 50 the size that we've been working on for the other drawings and what have you. And I thought, right, we could have a bolt in the centre, yes, for the smaller domes, or a double stud attachment for the larger spanning domes. And this then applies that if we wanted to use a 6-inch deep or an 8-inch deep, we just keep on modifying, depending on the size of the steel, of course, assuming that we use a box section in the end. We may well not, but this addresses the attachment issue. And then I thought, okay, what happened if we used 3-sided? So we've got a saddle that can slip over the end of the strut and leaving the bottom or the underside open, which might help or aid any possibility of moisture retention in a strut position. So you can imagine if this was more horizontal, as in the top pyramid, as I keep on referring to it, any moisture that could get in would have a chance of getting out. To be fair, the whole strut's on an angle, so any water that gets in is doing pretty darn good. But it's not so much water, free water, as in perhaps rainwater, which may be, but you can get that condensation, the difference between the temperature between the wood and the steel may allow condensation or a dew point to be created there, and if we can, well, it would be nice to allow it to wick out or dry out rather than being fully encased. Don't think that's a problem. I'm overthinking it, as I am wont to do. And then I thought, well, we might as well have a look at how it would look if it was in a hub situation. I'll get rid of the others. I don't think that's too ugly. After all, some of this can be covered, and this is just my first mock-up of it. And I thought, well, if you ever had the need, it is very likely that you could replace a strut. Now, how easy would that be when everything else is triangulated? Yeah, possibly not. I don't know. But why would you want to replace it? You've got problems if you did, I suppose. But it's adjustable, so you could fine-tune the length of the strut if something wasn't as accurate as we would like. I think it looks quite reasonable. A bit busy with all the bolts, or threaded rods, but really, considering that it addresses a lot of the attachment issues, these legs could be longer to make sure the bolts are further away from the end. But I think if you put 2 bolts in here for most struts, or strut lengths up to maybe 2 meters or so, just to throw a measurement into the hat for consideration, it'd be fine. Or you can put 4 in. Now that comes back to, now, do we need box section or hollow section to make these attachments or these parts of the hub up? Now, if I just go back to, so this situation here, do we just have a 2-sided, one either side, and the top, as you do see in a lot of hub designs, or rather attachment designs? But the reason I like this is if you bolt through here and there is some unusual force applied, the end of the strut being constrained on all 4 sides really makes the pressure dispersed, or it's not going to likely split at the bolt attachment point or screws attachment points. So it has a very positive connection without a lot of the drama of the threaded rods that may occur. Although I think the way we were looking at it, that still don't know. as I said, this was just my initial look at it, and I thought, we certainly need to chase down the idea a little bit, how difficult it is to build, how can you get the box section of this size to fit your timber sizes, and is it easier in the end just to fabricate it up, make a jig? Again, it comes back to it needs welding, so that becomes a specialist process. Or if you're good at welding, do it yourself, of course, but anyone that's listened to the videos before knows that you don't want me welding anything. Yeah, so that was just another, it's nothing new. You will have seen domes with this or similar. The actual photo came from here. Guys are making one up, and I'm assuming they've got a ring type bit of box section, and I don't think it is actually attached in the manner I have, but they've got a rod going into the timber possibly, and that I'm thinking is it's a ring around a square section around the timber, possibly to stop it from splitting. It's pretty hard to see, but you can see timber in the end there, and I'm assuming that's metal, and it's just attaching to the hub like I've been talking about. So their idea, or that's where I got the idea from. Yeah, so you can see the end of the timber. So yeah, that might be just to restrain the timber from splitting. Makes sense. I've just gone that little stage further because I wanted to have the attachments like this. They've actually basically done what I wanted to do, put a threaded rod, if they have, put a threaded rod down the centre of the timber, and they've gone that little step further in restraining the timber from splitting. And I've just taken it perhaps a logical or illogical step further along and combined a couple of methods. Interesting. Rightio. That was it. Just wanted to touch on that one. That one's going to be on the back burner for quite a while, I'd say, because I'm going to ruminate over that, because I actually don't mind it at all. It may well be that you can get away with a heavier single rod, 16mm or 20mm maybe, and put as I say, something to restrain the timber from splitting. Could be a good idea. Rightio. I'll leave with that, and I will come back in another video. Okay, see you later. Bye.